The moment the palace doors in Jordan stayed firmly shut, the illusion shattered, and suddenly the world was watching a royal-style drama explode into one of the most humiliating public snubs Meghan Markle has ever faced. What was supposed to be a carefully choreographed humanitarian triumph turned into a viral diplomatic disaster, and insiders say the fallout behind the scenes was far more explosive than anyone realized. Because this wasn't just a missed meeting, this was a royal rejection. And according to Palace Whispers, it triggered a furious reaction that exposed deep fractures inside the Sussex operation, the British royal family, and even their carefully curated global image. It all began with a trip that, on the surface, looked noble. Harry and Meghan arrived in Jordan under the banner of humanitarian work, hospital visits, refugee camps, carefully staged moments of compassion. Cameras flashed, photographers captured every angle, and Meghan, dressed in neutral designer tones and calm expressions, moved through hospitals and refugee camps like a woman determined to reclaim the spotlight of global humanitarianism. But behind the scenes, something much bigger was happening. Because long before the cameras rolled, letters had quietly been sent. Private letters requesting a royal reception. Sources revealed that the Sussex team had reached out directly to King Abdullah II and Queen Rania of Jordan, requesting an official meeting that would elevate their visit from charity work to full diplomatic prestige. The request referenced their titles and international status, presenting the trip as if it carried royal significance. There was just one problem. The Jordanian palace checked protocol, and protocol told a very different story. No official diplomatic telegram had been sent from Buckingham Palace. No authorization had come from the British Foreign Office. No signal from King Charles had ever approved this visit as royal business. Suddenly, the request looked less like diplomacy and more like an attempt to bypass the entire royal system. The response from the Jordanian court was icy. No meeting, no reception, no royal photo opportunity, just silence. For Meghan, that silence reportedly landed like a thunderclap, because according to insiders, that meeting with Queen Rania was supposed to be the defining image of the trip, the moment that would cement her image as a global stateswoman. Instead, the palace doors never opened, and within hours, whispers began circulating across diplomatic circles that the Hashemite royal family had deliberately refused to participate in what they saw as a private commercial venture. The humiliation didn't stay quiet for long. It leaked, and when it did, the story went viral. But while social media was exploding with speculation, something even more dramatic was unfolding inside royal circles back in London. Princess Anne, the famously blunt sister of King Charles, and the one royal known for having absolutely zero patience for theatrics. When reports reached her about the Jordan trip and the attempted royal meeting, insiders say her reaction was immediate and icy. For Anne, the issue wasn't just embarrassing, it was unacceptable, because Harry and Meghan are no longer working royals, and according to royal protocol, that means they cannot represent the crown abroad. Yet somehow, the trip was beginning to look exactly like a royal tour. Hospital visits, refugee camps, diplomatic outreach, even a reception held at the British ambassador's residence in Amman. To many inside the palace, the line between private citizens and royal representatives had just been dangerously blurred, and Anne was furious. The Princess Royal has spent decades performing some of the most relentless royal duties in history, traveling constantly, representing the crown quietly and professionally without turning those visits into media spectacles. To her, watching a former working royal appear to leverage royal titles for what looked like a promotional global tour crossed the line. One insider described her reaction as incandescent. Her message to aides reportedly cut straight through the drama. A title, she said, is not a master key for private gain. In other words, you cannot walk away from royal duty and then use the crown's prestige whenever it suits you. But the controversy didn't stop there, because while the diplomatic rejection was unfolding, Meghan's public appearances in Jordan were already raising eyebrows. At a hospital in Amman, she was photographed sitting beside a young refugee patient, gently holding the child's hand while cameras captured the moment from multiple angles. The imagery immediately sparked comparisons, because royal watchers recognized the pose instantly. It looked eerily similar to the famous humanitarian photos of Princess Diana visiting hospitals decades earlier. The tilted head, the quiet handhold, the soft eye contact. To some, it looked like a tribute. To others, it looked deliberate. Critics began accusing Meghan of recreating Diana-style imagery for the cameras, a strategy some insiders claim had been mapped out long before the trip began. And the comparisons didn't stop there. At the Zaatari refugee camp, Meghan joined children in a casual football moment, laughing, kicking a ball, posing mid-motion. Within hours, side-by-side images flooded social media, because the pose looked strikingly familiar. It closely resembled photos of Catherine, Princess of Wales, during her own royal tour years earlier. The similarities were impossible to ignore, and for many royal observers, the entire trip began to feel less like spontaneous charity work and more like a carefully choreographed attempt to recreate iconic royal moments. Back in London, that perception only intensified tensions. Princess Anne, fiercely protective of the monarchy's reputation, reportedly viewed the situation as something far more serious than bad optics. She saw it as a direct challenge to the institution itself, because according to emerging reports, the Jordan visit may have been part of a broader strategy drafted by the Sussex team years earlier, a global plan designed to reposition Harry and Meghan as international figures operating parallel to the monarchy. And Jordan was supposed to be a key stage in that plan. The reason? Its deep historical ties to the British royal family, especially to Catherine. By appearing there, especially alongside Queen Rania, Meghan could symbolically occupy the same humanitarian territory long associated with both Diana and Kate. But when the Jordanian palace refused the meeting, the entire plan began collapsing in real time. Instead of a triumphant royal-style reception, the world saw a diplomatic snub. Instead of validating their international influence, the rejection raised questions about their authority. And instead of strengthening their brand, the trip exposed something far more uncomfortable: the growing distance between Harry and Meghan themselves. Observers studying the footage noticed something unusual. The once inseparable couple, famous for constant hand-holding and whispered conversations, seemed strangely disconnected. In several moments, Meghan moved confidently through crowds, greeting officials and directing photographers. Harry lingered behind, silent, distant, almost detached. Some photographers later described him as looking haunted. In one sequence, Meghan laughed with children at the refugee camp while Harry stood just a few feet away, staring into the distance. No eye contact, no interaction, no shared moment. For a couple whose public identity was built on unity, the contrast was startling. And for palace insiders watching the footage later in London, the imagery raised an uncomfortable question. Had the carefully constructed Sussex partnership started to fracture under the weight of its own ambition? Because by the time the Jordan trip ended, one thing had become clear. What was meant to be a global triumph had turned into something very different: a diplomatic rejection, a viral controversy, and the beginning of a royal crisis that was about to explode far beyond Jordan. What happened after the Jordanian royal snub didn't just shake Meghan's carefully crafted global image, it triggered a chain reaction inside the British monarchy that insiders now say may permanently redefine Harry and Meghan's place in the royal world. Because while the cameras captured smiling humanitarian moments in Jordan, inside Windsor Castle the mood was very different: cold, strategic, and deeply serious. Within hours of the diplomatic rejection becoming known, a private meeting reportedly took place involving two of the monarchy's most formidable figures, Princess Anne and Prince William. And according to palace sources, the topic was not public relations. It was containment. The Jordan incident had exposed something that palace officials had quietly feared for years: the possibility that Harry and Meghan might continue using their royal titles to create the appearance of diplomatic authority while operating entirely outside royal control. To many inside the institution, the Jordan trip wasn't simply embarrassing. It was dangerous. Because when the Sussex team sent letters requesting a meeting with the Jordanian monarchs, those requests carried the weight of royal titles: Duke and Duchess of Sussex, titles still legally tied to the British crown. But there had been no royal authorization, no official communication, no sovereign endorsement. That meant a foreign royal court had been approached in a way that could easily be interpreted as a state-level request, even though the couple were acting as private individuals. For a monarchy built on centuries of diplomatic protocol, that was a serious breach. Inside the meeting room at Windsor, the conversation reportedly turned to one question: how do you stop this from happening again? Because the Sussex strategy, according to emerging reports, wasn't random. It had been mapped out years earlier in a long-term global plan created by their team, a roadmap that aimed to build a powerful international presence independent of Buckingham Palace. The Jordan visit was meant to be one of the biggest moments in that plan: a humanitarian stage, a royal backdrop, and ideally a historic photograph with Queen Rania that would instantly elevate Meghan's status as a global advocate. But instead, the refusal from the Jordanian royal family turned the moment into something else entirely: a global embarrassment. And according to insiders, Princess Anne was determined to make sure the monarchy never found itself in that position again. Her solution was swift. A new directive quietly circulated to British embassies around the world. The message was blunt. Harry and Meghan were to be treated as private individuals. No official receptions, no diplomatic resources, no embassy support, unless directly authorized by the king. It was a move insiders now describe as a diplomatic firewall. The goal was simple: remove any possibility that the Sussex titles could be used to secure state-level privileges abroad. In royal circles, the unofficial nickname for the directive quickly emerged: the Anne Protocol, and the implications were enormous. For the first time since stepping back from royal duties, Harry and Meghan were effectively being cut off from the diplomatic network that had once made global royal tours possible. But while strategy discussions unfolded in London, another wave of controversy was erupting online because the images from Jordan were spreading everywhere, and people were noticing something strange. Every photograph seemed perfectly composed. Every hospital visit, every moment with refugees, every emotional interaction, the lighting, the angles, the positioning. To some viewers, it looked less like spontaneous humanitarian work and more like a carefully produced visual campaign. One particular image ignited fierce debate. Prince Harry standing in a rehabilitation center examining a high-tech prosthetic limb while doctors explained its design. At first glance, the photo looked like a classic royal-style moment. Serious, compassionate, attentive. But as the image spread across social media, a painful irony emerged. Because thousands of miles away, Meghan's estranged father, Thomas Markle, had recently undergone a life-changing surgery involving the amputation of his own leg. Suddenly, the symbolism of the photo struck many observers as deeply uncomfortable. Harry discussing prosthetic limbs for global humanitarian awareness, while his own father-in-law was recovering alone from the same reality. The contrast was brutal, and critics seized on it instantly. To them, the moment represented something bigger than a single photograph. A diplomatic snub, a viral scandal, and a quiet but powerful shift in how the British monarchy intended to deal with Harry and Meghan moving forward. The trip meant to elevate their influence had done the opposite. It had drawn a line, and on one side stood the institution of the crown. On the other stood the Sussexes, navigating a global stage that suddenly looked far less welcoming than before. Less welcoming than before. Less welcoming than before. Less welcoming.